Today on the Chef's Cut, we are finally getting back to our three-part hospitality series, and we have a very special guest for part 2 who is a living legend. Have you ever wondered how the celebrity chef became a thing? Who decided that you had to leave a credit card to hold a restaurant reservation? And who ushered in the era of A-list actors investing in restaurants? Our guest today single-handedly created celebrity chefs as we know them. He turned Nobu into a global phenomenon, and he's the reason that you have to give a credit card to hold a reservation. We're talking about how he kicked off the era of the celebrity chef.
I put her name on the menu. He comes over to me and says, "What the hell is her name on the menu?"
Something he used to always pack on trips.
I went to Florida. I plug in the fax machine so they could fax me the actual reservation sheet. That is a little extreme.
And the massive celebrities he partnered with in his restaurants.
Sean Penn, Bill Murray, 𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗂𝗏, Christopher Walken, Ed Harris. Have I dropped enough names?
If you haven't guessed, it is legendary restaurateur and author Drew Nieporent. But first, Chef's Cut Nation, we need 10 seconds of your time. Please rate and review us wherever you get your podcasts. Your support is the reason that we've grown so fast, and your support is going to help us keep going. Let's get started. Drew, one thing that we find incredibly interesting, I know, is that, so you were the first person to put a chef's name on the menu. So you kind of helped create, as we know it today, what a celebrity chef is, known for a restaurant and bringing them out of the kitchen. You also worked with like actual celebrities, like you were partners with Robert De Niro, and you nurtured that relationship between him and Nobu to open the first Nobu in New York and then open in London and all this. So, you know, you partnered with Robert De Niro for Tribeca Grill also, which is another stellar restaurant that has a huge legacy here in New York. What is it like? Are celebrities good business partners, or do they just help create a splashy opening and create longevity?
Well, in 1990, when we opened Tribeca Grill, Planet Hollywood had preceded us. So Planet Hollywood was Sylvester Stallone, Bruce Willis, and Arnold Schwarzenegger. But the restaurant itself, Planet Hollywood, was a complete and utter disaster. So it shows you how stupid people are, because they're going to go to a restaurant owned by those three idiots, and you know the food is like inedible. So we opened in the middle of no place, Tribeca. Sean Penn, Bill Murray, 𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏, Christopher Walken, Ed Harris. Have I dropped enough names? Those guys, this is 1990. And then Mimi Sheridan, who had been a very difficult food critic for the New York Times, came in and she had a newsletter and she said the food is better than the celebrity watching. So the minute we had street cred, meaning that the food was good, New York Magazine, Gail Green was a terrific writer. She gave us an incredible write-up as well. And then we got 2 stars from Brian Miller, which was perfect. And the only time Tribeca Grill ever was reviewed in 38 years, one time by Brian Miller, that lasted 38 years. So,
wow.
So the bottom line is, I don't care if you're owned by the Pope or, you know, the food has to be good. That's the only way you have longevity. You know, let's face it, a lot of times you see an opening of a restaurant, you look at a photograph, or maybe you go there, you go, "Wow, oh, it's incredible. I got to come here." And you don't know who the chef is. You don't know what the menu is or the price is. But the place is so stellar because of the interior design that you want to go. Okay, that motivates some people. And of course, if you have celebrity ownership, that motivates some other people. "Oh my God, Taylor Swift ate here yesterday. We have to go here." And you can see on Instagram, obviously, that motivates a lot of people. But at the end of the day, I'm old school. You know, I can't help it. I mean, I was born in 1955. So, you know, my formula is very simple. Serve great food in a timely fashion, by the way. You know, the food has to come out of the kitchen. That's an enormous problem almost in every restaurant, because people somehow, you know, design things with too many elements, and it takes forever. But the bottom line is that has served me, whatever I've done. There's 57 Nobus, but that's not my thing. I have opened 40 separate restaurants, which, by the way, is not the way to do it today. But back then, it was like making a movie. Each one had a different plot and different actors, and, you know, and a different fare.
You and Joe actually have a ton in common. You won Outstanding Restaurateur in 2009 from the James Beard Foundation. Joe is nominated this year for Outstanding Restaurateur with his group. It's a title that back in the day, you heard more about restaurateurs. You were responsible for ushering in the age of the celebrity chef and bringing the chef's name to the forefront. So now the role of the restaurateur isn't necessarily as known. So what is your definition of the role of a restaurateur?
That's a good one. And by the way, they never at the James Beard Awards had a Restaurateur of the Year award. So when they put it in, the first year, of course, who wins? The Pope of America, 𝗵𝗵𝗲𝗖𝗵𝗲𝗳, of course, he wins. But then the next year, it was Rich Melman, Piero Salvaggio di Nieporent, and Daniel Boulud. And Daniel Boulud won. Then the third year was and Thomas Keller, and Thomas Keller won. And the fourth year, and Mario Batali, and Mario Batali won. So I was pissed off because the chef's award, and they kept throwing the chefs into the Restaurateur award. So they came over to me and said, listen, you're going to be happy this year. The criteria for the Restaurateur of the Year is you cannot have been a chef. So of course I won that year. That was 2009. So now, because they've changed the whole Beard Award thing, and it's changed quite a bit, the criteria has changed. So Stuart Brioza, who was my chef at Rubicon, he's also nominated for Restaurateur of the Year. Chefs are restaurateurs. They are. They run restaurants, especially the ones they own. But a restaurateur is over here, okay? And a chef is over here, let's just say. And for me, a restaurateur is somebody who's worked their way up in the industry, has worked for other people, rubs together a couple of nickels, opens their own business. Jeffrey Zakarian one day, I don't know what we were talking about, he said, I'm not a chef. I'm a restaurateur. And I'm looking at this guy, and when I walk down the street and people recognize me for whatever reason, they go, chef, because they can't say Mr. Restaurateur. That's ridiculous. So I said, Jeffrey, let me explain something. People, they love you being a chef. Yeah, you're a restaurateur. You've opened and closed a lot of restaurants, I understand. But the definition for a chef is much better than a restaurateur. The restaurateur is a rarefied position. There are very few of them.
Yeah, I mean, you guys set the tone for the whole business. Usually the restaurateur creates the concept behind what the restaurant is going to be, how the decor is going to evoke or kind of display what that concept is, because you can't have those two things disjointed. It's a whole experience. It's not just the menu.
Right. But in the 60s and the 70s, the chef was an employee. The restaurateur, or a family business who hired a chef, they didn't promote the chef. In 1982, I was hired as a general manager, and I put Leslie Revson was our chef, woman chef in New York, very few at the time. Put her name on the menu. He comes over to me and says, what the hell is her name on the menu? I go, well, it's like a movie. You put the actors on the poster, and he goes, yeah, but, and meanwhile, he was paying her a fortune. But the point is, I always believe that the chef, and I believe to this moment, actually, that the personality of the chef, the character of the chef really embodies the restaurant. You can't just replace that person easily.
Yeah, I always think like when I think about restaurateurs, I think of like the Danny Meyers, the Kevin Babes, these people who, came up in the industry and then they're running restaurants, like working floors and like looking at all the little details. And I think, getting into one of those things, like one of the questions I really wanted to ask you is, I mean, the list of chefs you've worked with over the years is crazy, from Nobu to Boulay to Paul Lieberath to Tracy Desjardins to, I mean, the list is unreal. But like, how do you, when you look at a young chef coming up, when you see someone out there in the wild, either whether coming up in your ranks or from somewhere else, how do you look at them? How do you judge that talent? Like, what's your criteria? That's the difference between somebody who's just a really talented, great cook and somebody who you're like, I can build something around them.
Whenever I would have a project, or for that matter, had to replace a chef, I'd make a list of people I was interested in. Because, of course, not everybody's going to want to work with you. And whoever I chose on that list, varying degrees of success, the others on that list also had great success. So it did prove to me that I kind of understood who was talented and who was not. But at the end of the day, I don't need somebody to be supplicant. I don't need somebody to kiss my ass or listen to what I do. All I need is somebody who wants to play music with you. So like when you play music with somebody, you have to listen to the other person in order for you to be able to play together. And the unfortunate thing, and it comes out in my book, is I chose some really talented people who at the end of the day, when we got the 3 stars, they wanted to take the 3 stars, put it in their bag, walk across the street. Fuck you. and that hurt the most.
When you opened Montrachet in 85, was it? And then later on in the same space, wound up opening 2 more restaurants, 3 3-star reviews in a row. I think that's some kind of record. I don't think any restaurateur has done that. You did it with Montrachet, with David Boulay, Cortone, Paul Liebrandt, and Marcus Glocker with Batard, like all stellar chefs that you found and opened restaurants around this chef.
One space, not a great space, by the way, but in a sleepy block on Tribeca, over a 38-year period, got 3 stars again and again and again.
So what is a detail as a restaurateur? What is a detail that you, in your 40+ year career, opening 40 restaurants, what is a detail that you obsess over that guests may not even notice?
Well, I just think it's the way you conduct yourself. In other words, the fish stinks from the head. So you yourself, you can't drink in front of your staff. You have to be an example, literally of purity sometimes, because the smallest little thing will out itself. You want a certain standard in the food and in the service. And the second you slip up and you do something stupid on a personal level, your staff is going to see you doing that. So the customers are not going to see your education, the fact that I went to Cornell Hotel School. The customers aren't going to see that you worked on a cruise ship when you were 18 years old as a waiter and you know what you're talking about. And the customers don't care, by the way. But your staff sees everything. They see the way you conduct yourself. That's why a lot of very successful restaurateurs are actually absentee. They can screw up off premise and nobody sees it. But, I'll give you an example. It's like Nobu, okay? There are 57 Nobus around the world. 57. And I love Nobu, but I'll tell you what, if Nobu was at any particular location, it wouldn't work. He'd get people nuts because, he's very critical about certain things. You have to know when to put pressure on and when not to put pressure on. But the whole thing is that you have to set a standard of excellence, and then you improve upon it every year. And the way you improve upon it is you treat your staff with dignity and respect, and the chef you pray wants to stay with you. In my era, in the 80s and 90s, it is like the Yankees. You might have a good player, but you don't make him your partner. So now the chefs are made partners, which in the theory of the money person makes them stick to the restaurant. Feels that as if they have a piece of the action, they're not going to leave readily, and that's not necessarily the truth. Yeah. They leave anyway. But what the reality is, it's a very delicate balance. The fact that my restaurant stood the test of time, that's incredible. I mean, that's like,
yeah,
I can't even believe that.
One of the things I wonder about when I see people who have done this successfully for years, what are the things that you learn to let go of where you're like, these are things that I have to let the team handle. They can't be me things. And what are things that you're like, no matter what, I have to hold on to this? And are there specific things or does it vary?
The thing that always I laugh at is like, people, when we're talking, they say, oh, you must be a really good business person. And I'm not. I'm not a good numbers person. I'm not a good business person. I do. This is the way I open. I open a restaurant. I make sure the food is good, priced not too crazy. That's an important thing, But now restaurants are ridiculous, price-wise. I try to hire people that I believe are competent, and I just let it evolve naturally. I swear to God, I do not worry about the bottom line ever. Now, if you're losing money, obviously you have to figure out. But generally speaking, that's my modus operandi. I open a restaurant, and I let it go. I let it be a natural.
I don't know, Drew. I'm going to call a little bit of bullshit here, because in your book, you said that you used to travel with a fucking fax machine, and you would be.
But that's different. No, Adrian, the reason in New York for a while it was where you sit versus what you ate. I'll give you a quick example. I'm working. It was a Monday night, which is supposed to be quiet night, and it was very busy. And I have a French waiter, Francois. He comes over to me and says, "Mr. Ford wants to come in at 8 o'clock." I said, "Just take it." I was running around for whatever. Okay. 8 o'clock comes around. Malcolm Forbes walks in the door. And at that time, he was a big shot. And they reviewed restaurants in the Forbes. No big deal. And I had the shittiest table in the whole restaurant. One table left. And he sat in the shittiest table. I think he had a good time. But because the French guy goes Ford and not Forbes, I went to Florida. I plug in the fax machine so they could fax me the actual reservation sheet. That is a little extreme. But that's not really a business thing. That's more personal services.
Okay. Because, it's as you manage businesses and as you manage people, and I know how Joe is with his restaurants, there are things that restaurateurs and business owners obsess over. And it's like, I want to let the team manage this thing, but you still feel so personally vested in it. And when, in your book, you talked about the reservation list, and that is true. I mean, it was a different time. There was no Resi, no open table. People literally had to call and make reservations, and you would do a lot of that. You would sit outside the restaurants and literally hand write the reservation sheets for each service.
I'll just let you know that when we got 3 stars from Montrachet and April of 1985, the phone never stopped ringing. I mean, it was constant. And we'd actually have to put a recording on after 5 o'clock so we could go to work, because we didn't want to pay somebody to just say no to people that they couldn't come in. And then, the stupid things in the restaurant business, like the no-shows and the concierges who, make fake reservations and then they don't show up, and all that, stuff you learn, as you go along, obviously. But,
which you were the first person to institute the policy of making people leave a credit card to hold the table.
When you told somebody you were going to take a credit card, it was like you're going to, like you were effing your mother. I mean, it was like, they were outraged. What are you talking about? I mean, literally one time somebody didn't show up. So I called the number and they go, "Oh, he's out for dinner." And the babysitter, and said, "Well, where is he?" And she gives me the number. So I call the number, and it's Lafayette, John George's restaurant at that time. And I knew the general manager. I said, "Could you bring Dr. blah, blah, to the phone?" And he comes to the phone. I go, "This is Nieporent from Montrachet, where you had a reservation, but you didn't show up. And I just let you know, I'm coming to your office. I'm going to make a reservation, and I'm going to cancel last minute so that you don't have an, the shoe's never on the foot with these people." I would do that. That's what I
also calling someone at a restaurant and like having the GM go get them is such another era that's like so cool. You know what I mean? It's like you call the GM, you're like, "Go get this guy out of his seat and bring him the phone." That's such a flex. It's awesome. I love it.
I will find you.
How about this one? The waiter comes and says, "The woman says the fish is not fresh." So I go to the table. I said, "Excuse me?" I said, "What's the problem?" I said, This is not fresh fish." I go into the walk-in box. I take out a whole fucking salmon, and I walked it right over to the table. And I said, "Which part of this is not fresh to you?" The whole fish. I mean, it's like, here's the thing I would say. This is kind of a lesson. I don't think it's in the book, but you can have a perfect night. Everything goes well, and one person mugs you. That's what I call it, a mugging, and it spoils the whole day.
Yeah,
because that's what you remember.
Right.
As a restaurateur, you have to believe you can't let that person or that incident cloud everything else, but it does.
you said you were never interested in opening the exact same cookie cutter restaurant in different locations, that you were more about each one having its own identity.
Exactly.
And I thought that was really cool, because Rubicon in San Francisco, very different from Montrachet or Tribeca Grill or Nobu. You know, it's like they all kind of stood alone. They had their own chefs. They had their own identity. You also ushered in like a whole wave of, you know, now what are like celebrity and some of the most well-known sommeliers in the industry and beverage professionals.
Yeah. The beverage thing cannot be underestimated. I was a captain at 𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏, which was a 4-star restaurant when I was working there. And one night I'm pouring Le Morachet for a customer, and I just look at the bottle and I'm like, what? I was going to open a restaurant. My first restaurant was going to be called the Silverado Trail. But I'm looking at this Morachet. I was like, why am I going to try to reinvent the wheel? Morachet. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to call it Morachet. And then I ran the New York Marathon in 1983, and this whirlwind trip in California, dozens of restaurants. And the last place was 𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗂𝗏 at Sutter 500. And the food was ridiculous. It was so amazing. But he's in California. When I got back to New York, you know, I called him, would you ever consider blah, blah, blah. And very tough guy, 𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏. I mean, the greatest probably, you know, God rest his soul, great chef, but he was impossible to deal with. Yet we opened the first restaurant with a 16 3-course menu.
Which is insane. It's insane. Even for the time, I'm sure it was like well priced.
No, I like when we was like $75, and you could make money charging $16. But then when we got the 3 stars, because anybody could go there. Just you couldn't find the place because it's on a misbegotten street in Tribeca.
Right. Tribeca was no man's land back then. Like Tribeca was not cool. Tribeca was not flashy. It was not a cool neighborhood. And when you opened the restaurants, it brought it up.
The whole thing for me was because of my growing up with my dad working with the State Liquor Authority and licensing all these different restaurants. I always wanted to do that. In other words, I always wanted to be able to conceptualize and do all these different restaurants. And guess what? I did. The reason I wrote this book is because I always look at a 60 Minutes interview where they're interviewing Bob Dylan. Ed Bradley's interviewing Bob Dylan, and he looks at him and he goes, these songs that you write, how do you do it? And Bob Dylan's like, I don't know. And I was like, what do you mean? How did Bob Dylan doesn't know? So I kind of feel that way now. It's like I see the body of my work and I'm like, oh my God, how did I pull this off? But I did.
It's kind of like, just keep waking up and keep grinding at it. Just like, you know what I mean? We just got to keep doing stuff and, you know, putting the work in, and you know what I mean? And you just hope it keeps going good. I think it's almost like parenting. And it's like realizing, I feel like growth in restaurants, the more you get up in it, is like realizing it's like, it's kind of the same thing. We're all just out here.
I would
like
just
trying to make plans, trying to make it, and be like, whew, you believe that one worked?
Yeah, but I would just tell you that number one, you got to strike while the kettle is hot. That's number one. And number two, never delude yourself. In other words, you know, if the numbers, like the rent is always the first thing. If the landlord is going to be very, you know, stingy and difficult at the very beginning, that's the way it's going to work towards the end. Morachet had a 3-page lease. And when he died, his son took over, and he never hosed us. And the reality is, I literally, 38 years later, sold the restaurant to a husband and wife. The husband is a chef. And their rent is $20,000 a month, less than Frenchette, which is right next door. So that's $250,000
Whoa.
That's in their pocket every year. And by the way, I sold them this restaurant. They got 3 stars. So not only did my restaurant get 3 stars 3 times, they just got 3 stars. You know,
Man.
So there's synergy. But for you, like you're doing this now, don't delude yourself. And you know, there's also power in the brand. You know, in other words, like when I would look at other places to do Nobu, I was like, we're so busy. Why are we going to screw this thing up by opening another one? But it's like Phantom of the Opera, still playing 30 years later.
So, Drew, you've talked about Mimi Sheridan. You've seen generations of food critics come from the New York Times, other publications, legacy publications, and you had some really close relationships with some of these food critics. And then towards kind of the end of your career, when you were kind of starting to step away and sell the space, was when online reviews started becoming a thing, the crowdsourced kind of thing, the rise of the food influencer. And that was kind of in its early stages. But what do you think about those crowdsourced public reviews? Do you trust them as much as the journalists who, were a little more embedded in that world?
I absolutely don't trust. I read them, but I don't trust them. Listen, I'm very fortunate because my restaurants have always been well received. When people are critical, as long as the criticism is constructive, when it's stupid, it's like, I look back on the food critics, they had too much power, especially the New York Times. And their qualifications were various. Some were more qualified than others. We all revere Ruth Reichel. I mean, and when she became the food critic, the West Coast restaurateurs called us up and told us, "You're in trouble. She's going to kill you." But she was very fair, and she knew her job. I never wanted to wake up and read my obituary in the New York Times. So I made it my business to understand the critics. When Frank Bruni, for instance, he hated Paul Liebrandt. I mean, Paul Liebrandt designed a restaurant in the Helmsley Palace that was like a 3-star restaurant with your eyes closed. And he gave it 2 stars, and he knocked it. So I go to Paul Liebrandt, and I'm like, this guy's, he's the next 3-star chef. So he decides he's going to do this restaurant with me, Corton. We redesign it. No Bruni. And then one night, it's like 9:30. I didn't even look at the party coming in. I was seating the room. I was at the door. And I seat the table. And the next thing you know, Frank Bruni is like literally in my face going, "It's his birthday." One of his guests. And as I turn around, my staff's behind me like, because I had, trained them to know what this guy looked like. Because Frank Bruni at that time had this extreme power. Now, they made a movie about this called A Matter of Taste. It actually won a James Beard Journalism Award about Corton.
Paul Liebrandt,
and Frank Bruni's in the movie. And Frank Bruni.
When he gave him the 3-star review?
Yeah.
Oh, that's right.
And by the way, it was so unusual because the review came out online, which was at that time, it was like, maybe 05, 06, something like that. It was very unusual to get the review not on a specific day in the paper. It was online. So the filmmaker happened to be in the restaurant, and I go to the filmmaker and I go, "Listen, the review came out. I haven't read it yet. Why don't you film me reading it to the staff?" And, so she does. And I get to the end of the review, and there's no stars attached. They're just not there. So he's like, "Oh my God, I don't think," and I'm like, because it basically says, I thought we were going to get, actually, the week before he gave 3 stars to Momofuku Ko, which was ridiculous, by the way. So I thought, as I'm reading this review, it reads so well, I thought we're going to get 4 stars. But there's a moment he says, but unlike Le Bernardin, Danielle, it falls just below. So basically, we knew we got 3 stars, which is all we got. Because, if you get 4 stars, guess what? It's only downhill from there.
Right. And I mean, Paul Liebrandt is such like an intense guy. He actually judged an episode, one of the challenges of our season of Top Chef, Joe. Do you remember that?
Yeah, we were on top of the mountain.
Were you kicked off that time, or were you there?
Oh, I was there.
Okay,
I was on the comeback trail. I was on the comeback trail.
And he's super intense, but he's got this like cherubic kind of baby face and a kind of a soft-spoken demeanor, but he's got that kind of vibe where you're like, no, don't set him off. Like he just has that feeling about him, super intense. So I can imagine him pacing while you're like reading that review out.
Yeah, well, I mean, the movie is extraordinary. I watched the movie now, and it was a really well done film about our industry, and it was a feel-good story. And of course, so what did Paul Liebrandt do? A cook comes out of the kitchen at Cortone, comes to me, goes, when are we going to Brooklyn? I like, what are you talking about? He goes, oh, Paul told us we're all going to be in Brooklyn. So he hadn't said anything to me. I find out, place in Williamsburg, blah, 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 blah. When I finally sit down with him, he's like, oh, I was going to tell you, I want to keep Cortone, but I go, well, let me explain. I don't want to compete with myself. You're going to make a hamburger in Williamsburg, and everyone's going to go over there and rave about your hamburger and not come here. And as it was, we weren't that busy. Even with a 3-star review, it was kind of a strange thing. So I let him loose. And that's when we eventually did Petard, which of course got 3 stars, best new restaurant in America. So, I mean, look, Paul Lee-Brandt, tremendously talented guy. Where is he right now?
That's so crazy.
He literally, when after Cortone, he went to it was called the Elm in Williamsburg, and it did nothing. I mean, that's 20 years ago. It's insane. Yeah. It's insane. But he gets companies to probably pay him to endorse a product or something like that. So
and do some consulting things.
It's not a world that I live in, but it's a different world.
Yeah, it's so crazy. Like back in the day, like people used to contact the restaurateur to open a space, and then the restaurateur would find the chef. Now people are contacting the chef directly. So the chef is more the business person and the food. Like that's a lot. That's a lot for one person to kind of handle on their own. But Drew, as you look back, because again, this is like, we're doing this for the benefit of Joe. He's in his early restaurateur era, and these are all lessons for Joe to learn throughout the rest of what is sure to be a stellar career. What matters more to you now, looking back at some of your legacy? Is it the restaurants themselves, or is it the people who have come through them, front and back of house?
No, I think the people, at the end of the day, first of all, the word that just every single person uses till I'm blue in the face is the team. Okay, I get it, but I never use that term. It's just I always treated everybody, in my opinion, with dignity. That's the key element. And then it used to bother me quite a bit, quite frankly, when sometimes I'd say, well, where's Lindsay? Oh, she left. What do you mean? She, didn't say goodbye. You've been signing this person's check for, 3 years or whatever. But when people decide to leave, and if they're not going to say goodbye as they leave out the door, that's their decision. I mean, it's, I've worked with so many people. That's the most gratifying thing, without question. People, especially now where information is so fluid and so fast, they don't remember anything. I mean, people there's so many unbelievable restaurants that are in the graveyard of, in New York, 21 Club and the Four Seasons and Rainbow Room, and it's nobody cares. Here's the bottom line: our generation, we improve the product. The food in all these French restaurants, which in New York dominated the scene, Philadelphia, Le Perrier, Georges Perrier and Le Bec Fin, Chicago, Le Bon Jean Marchais and Le Francois. Okay, the French dominated everything. Yeah. And some did a better job than others. We raised the bar. The Danny Myers and the Drew Nieporents, Stephen Stars, Rich Melman. I mean, we really did. We raised the bar. Now the only thing is, don't charge too much, because I see it happening. Like roast beef, a slab of roast beef is $125. And it's a slab of roast beef. Rotisserie chicken, you can get a good one at Costco or someplace else for $9.99. But at Danielle, a half chicken is like $50. So that means the chicken's $100, or maybe more, even some places. So cost to me is very important. The one thing I realized is only one person in the restaurant at the table of the reservation pays the check. So that's the only person feeling the pain of having to pay the check. The rest of the people, they order, whatever it is. So, you see the prices have creeped up. Tasting menus, disaster. Who wants to sit there for 3 hours and have 30 courses? Joe, I hope you're not doing this, but
No.
we're tired of being guinea pigs. Just hand us a menu. Give me one nice bowl of food with nice portion size and hot and piping. But it's a big fish bowl. Everyone's capable of doing their own thing, and they are. So, and I respect everybody. I hate it when, I know Adrian. Eric Ripert, and so Eric Ripert. He stepped into a very, very, very difficult situation. I was there. I saw what 𝗵𝗵𝗲𝗄 did.
Oh, wow.
I saw that whole beginning. And Eric Ripert came out of the Jean-Louis Paladin school.
Yep.
And but the greatest thing about Eric Ripert is his character and the way he treats people. And that's why that restaurant deserves everything. It's not that he can saute, poach, or bake a piece of fish better than everyone else, although he might be able to do that. That's fine. It's the character. His character evidences itself in the food. Even Anthony Bourdain, who was a terrible, terrible chef, great writer, unbelievable, show, no reservations and everything else. But he was a terrible cook. Even he became friendly with Eric because of Eric's character.
Yeah. They were great friends.
But when I sat down with Eric, with Adrian, just sitting in his library with him, it was like just his presence. You were like, man, it was just like, you nailed it. It's character. You're just like, when you sit by someone and you're like, this is a person who is a leader because people want to follow him. It's not because of any title. It's not whoever he is, but it's like, this is a person who you would just follow if you met him on a bus, because it's like the confidence, it's the poise, it's the way he speaks to you. If I met you on a random street and you were like, we're going this way, I'd be like, all right, yeah, I'm going with this dude. This is my guy now.
When I was younger, I opened Montrachet when I was 29 years old. I would do a lot of charity work, and it was very novel at that time to travel to another city. You would be invited. Now today it's, oh my God, collaborative meal. It's like it's never been thought of. We did this in the 80s, but the real reason I did it, even though I should have done it just for the charity of it, was I wanted to see these celebrated chefs out of their own element and what their ideas were, and interact with them and meet them and talk with them. And it was so important to me because I would meet some of these people who had unbelievable reputations. And their item for the dinner or for the taste around, whatever, was illogical. Mm-hmm. And it showed to me like who I wanted to work with and who I didn't. More about who I did. And I'm talking about dozens. So I myself was tapped to do a lot of charity and bring in chefs. I brought in 18 chefs every year to a charity we did in Jackson Hole. And there's always one or two that is a total pain in the ass. And now it's just like what you might have said a moment ago, which is, because I had set the tone and bringing these people in. That was extraordinarily important because I was able firsthand see how talented or not the people who had gotten all these incredible reputations were, from Chicago, from California, and some people live up to the hype and some people just don't.
Yeah.
It's just, but you file that away. You don't have to be nasty about it. You just, but even today.
Mental note.
Yeah. Well, even today, Mark Vetri every year does Alex's lemonade stand in Philadelphia. He gets like 50 of the best chefs on the planet. And it's such a great event. And it's like you go around and you sing hello to everybody. And everyone shows up for Mark. And then they invited me this year to California, where the same event, Suzanne Goin in California, same kind of thing, Nancy Silverton, same kind. And that's the community, the chef and restaurateur, the restaurant community at its best. When we all get together for charity, raise a little bit of money, but we get to know each other as well.
Yeah.
Help each other. That's the bottom line. Let's help each other as much as we can.
I will say the thing about doing those events, I do this one in Florida every year, and it's the same catering company that's been putting it on for 25 years. So it's the same servers that do an event, so they have a different chef every year. And I always like talking to them about like what chefs they've worked with in the past, because they always have the best insight. And they always have that one where they're like, oh man, yeah, we had him the one year. He's a real son of a bitch or whatever. And it's, and it's like you said, it's always interesting here, like who lives up to the hype. And you're like, oh man, then you put them cooking in somebody's house for 35 people. And it's like, gets a little, things get a little,
dicey.
Pressed. And you know what I mean? How they respond to it, because I'm always like, oh, we're just going in, we're going to have a good time.
When you go to those events, you're right. Like people freak out because you're in a new environment. The fryer might not get as hot, or the ovens might be on the fritz, or just different things. And it's just how you handle them. There's no problem that we can't find a solution to. It might take a little longer to find the workaround, but at the end of the day, like it's going to be fine.
But I'll tell you, some chefs don't know how to play an away game. They got no away game, and it's a different skill set. I always say I
love Adrian. Like, there's a solution to a problem. Not always. I did an event in Florida once where they ran out of lobster, and it was.
Well, that's a problem.
No, but I mean, it was like, like you could see it happening because they had no system where when the waiters came up, they let the waiters, order verbally. And I mean, it was a disaster. But I worked on cruise ships where the same thing was. I've been around the block. That doesn't mean a thing other than I've been able to see the good, the bad, and the ugly, and being able to at least prepare, for the worst and hope for the best. That's
Drew,
what I do. The away game, I've never used that analogy. That's a great.
I love it.
I love it.
That's how I was thinking. I'm like, we are a strong away team. We pack out well. We roll in anywhere well. But I've met some chefs who I think are phenomenal chefs, and I've watched them play an away game, and I'm like, you're a dome team. You should stay inside.
Drew, what to you is harder? And I know we're coming to the end of our time, but what's harder? Is it harder to start something great, or is it harder to know when to walk away?
I think it's harder to know when to walk away. I never had a bad idea for a restaurant, but to walk away, I'll give you an example. Rubicon, I love being in San Francisco. Absolutely adored it. And then I opened a second restaurant in Sonoma called Freestyle. Very good chef, Steve.
Did you partner with Francis Ford Coppola on both of those restaurants? Yeah. Okay.
Not both, not Freestyle, but Francis Rubicon is his winery. So California is like, I love California, but it's a communist country. I mean, you cannot make a buck there. So I ran that too long. I lost my shirt there. But I met 𝗵𝗵𝗲𝗄, who's the most successful San Francisco chef today. Of course, Tracy went to work for Pt.2 after we had gotten the 3 stars. That was a bad move, but she's since, we're obviously very friendly, and I think she regrets that, but it doesn't matter. I mean, people do what they do, but walking away from a restaurant, you have to know when to hold and when to fold, definitely.
Yeah, that's tough. And I mean, I think it's kind of funny that the title of your book is, not trying to be difficult. Do you see yourself still as difficult, or have you just made peace with that's how you are?
I didn't name the book. I had a different name for the book, and I'm not difficult. People who know me, I'm difficult because I want to get my way, but it's not my way or the highway. If somebody has a better way, I'll listen to them. And I'm not trying to be difficult. When I read the audiobook, Adrian, and I kind of understood why somebody came up with that title, but it's impossible to open 40 restaurants and be difficult.
That's a good point.
I'm not difficult, but I'm not trying to be. I guess it's a provocative title. I went with it, but the movie,
it is. And
if they make a movie about my life, it ain't going to be called I'm Not Trying.
It is a provocative title. And I was like, you don't seem unreasonably difficult to me. Honestly, like going through the book and everything.
That's also
I was
because you're a super difficult person. So I think that comparatively, you know what I mean? It's everybody else seems reasonable.
Joseph. See what I have to deal with here, Drew?
So, Drew, we are coming up on time, but I just got to ask because there's parts of this industry that I'm wildly curious about. I had a couple friends do it, but you worked on cruise ships when you were 18.
Right. Absolutely.
Like,
adored it.
You adored it.
I loved it. Oh my God. It's amazing.
It's like, that is my nightmare. You know what I mean? Like being trapped on a boat like that, doing that. But I mean, that had to be insane. Like, you got to give me, I need one. If you have one great cruise ship story, I would love that, of just like your time at sea, of like, you know, what a wild experience or something. Like, that's something I would really make my day.
Yeah. I'm walking down the corridors of Cornell Hotel School. There's a posting looking for 6 waiters experienced in Russian service to sail to the following ports: Leningrad, Oslo, Copenhagen, Stockholm. I had never, ever, ever worked as a waiter. I called the number. I got the job. I get on the MS Vista Fjord in New York, 42-day cruise, Baltic Sea, Norway, blah, 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 blah. And there's 60 waiters, 600-seat dining room, single seating, Austrian kitchen. Kitchen is downstairs by escalator.
Oh.
And I'm the
only escalator. And I'm the only person wearing a light blue shirt. And I had 59 waiters outing me. Plus they're holding the tray like that. I'm holding the tray like that. So, you know, like everyone knew I was an imposter. But the customers are the 𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏 from wherever they came from. And they loved the fact that I understood them and was able to cater to them. And they're European or Scandinavian waiters didn't understand or speak the English. So I was very successful. But here's the story. So at lunch, we used to have what they call, you know, cold buffet each station. And there were like 16 𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏, you know, herrings or curried this or that. And, you know, most of the time you'd give a little tasting, you know, like a variety of things for your guests. So I went to the kitchen, I went to the garde-manger, and you couldn't put it on a tray. There were too many things. So the cover of the stand was a big piece of plastic, and you bring that down, you put everything on that. And so as I'm going up the escalator, and I'm holding the tray like this, you know, under, you know, I felt the escalator getting narrower. And somehow I go like this, you know, I pull, and I had 16 ravier dishes of food full on the escalator, you know, the gears and the cracked plates and everything. But the worst thing was not the cleanup, but having to go back to the garde-manger and get 16 new dishes and get yelled at and screamed at, and then go upstairs and get yelled at and screamed at by the waiters that you were working with. So that was just one little thing. But that sort of remains with me. And you can't even escape it. You're trapped on a boat. It's not like, well, I'm not coming back tomorrow. It's like, well, I got 41 more days. I got 41 more days of being the guy who dropped all the dishes.
Right. But you work breakfast, lunch, and dinner 7 days a week. And for me, it was like military service. I was visiting all these extraordinary places. And it was phenomenal. And the food, by the way, was extraordinary. It's just, you know, so I learned so much on those ships. I went back about 15 different times. I went back every Christmas. They had Christmas cruises. I went back almost 3 years in the summer. And even when I graduated from college, nobody offered me a position. The recruiters that came to Cornell, nobody offered me anything. So I went back on the cruise ships as well. So the cruise ships for me were the real, the proving grounds.
Nice. That's awesome. See, Joe, cruise ships aren't so bad after all.
Because I remember in culinary school them talking to us about the cruise lines. And I remember, like, especially those ones, like those Norwegian cruise lines. They were like, if you go there, it's like, you know what I mean? They're like, you fly up, you trade at Alaska, and then basically, like, you don't talk to your family for 2 months, and you just go to Scandinavian countries and, like, serve pickled fish.
It's not that bad.
Yeah.
I mean, I was going in the 70s. I worked on the ships in the 70s. That's how long ago that was. But I love it.
So that's why I'm like, it just must have been wild. Because I mean, yeah, like you're just gone, right? You're just like, I'm gonna get on this boat, and you know, like a picture, like, you know, you kiss your girlfriend at the port, and you're like, I'll see you again one day. You know, I'm off to sea. You know what I mean?
Wave
like,
the handkerchief.
Just, you know, you and Hemingway leaving port together, and you know.
All I'm going to say is, I hope my book is nominated for a journalism award So I'm going to go to Chicago, or they asked me to be a presenter after like 7 years of dry dock, because I'm coming to see you. We're either going to go to a Cub game, or we're going to have something at one of your restaurants. And Adrian, we're definitely having lunch at Nobu, but if you're in Chicago, you're going to join us as well.
Oh, hell yeah. It's happening.
Yeah. I would love to make you lunch.
We got a lot of war stories.
I promise the prices are reasonable, and they're nice sized portions too.
I just want
no
you to
tasting
know,
menus.
You guys do a great job with this thing. That's why I reached out, and I appreciate being on.
Oh, thank you so much for joining us, Drew.
We've been looking forward to this all week, and just an absolute pleasure.
That's it for this episode of The Chef's Cut. Be sure to subscribe wherever you're listening, especially if you're watching us on YouTube, where you can find full-length video episodes of the show every week. And be sure to follow us at The Chef's Cut Pod on IG. For Joe Flam, I'm Adrienne Cheatham, and this has been The Chef's Cut. Life beyond the pass.